Funding for Shaperillis is provided by
Squarespace, the sponsor of today's video. Hey gamers, during the long process of categorizing every unique vote in the Zelda poll, I thought it might be a good idea to replay the 3D Zeldas and refamiliarize myself with all those kooky characters that I hadn't seen in years in some cases. And in the process, it occurred to me that why don't I just make a second video about this? See, I love Zelda dungeons. I adore these thematically interesting puzzle boxes where there's nothing but good old-fashioned gameplay for you to experience for an hour or two. Forget story, forget cutscenes, this is Zelda in its purest and most exciting form. Except when it's not. Some of these dungeons really kinda suck ass. And yet some of them are incredible. Man, talking about them all sounds like a job for someone who likes ranking things. Well, I guess it's up to me. Here's my personal ranking of every dungeon from all 7 of the 3D Zelda games. I'm gonna be judging them on all fronts. How fun they are, how great the atmosphere is, if they have a uniqueness factor, if the item you get and use throughout the dungeon is enjoyable, and a great or terrible boss has the potential to elevate or lower its ranking, respectively. Since this video is long enough already, I'm not including any of the mini dungeons like the Bottom of the Well from Ocarina of Time, or the Ancient Castle of Ikana from Majora's Mask. Nor am I including any of the final dungeons, since most of those are structured differently than regular dungeons. And some of them are really just marathon rehashes of previous dungeons you've already beaten. Basically, my criteria boils down to, does the dungeon have a boss at the end who gives you a heart container when you beat them? If the answer is yes, it's on the list. If not, I decided not to include it. Sorry Skykeep from Skyward Sword, you're pretty cool, but no boss means no ranking. Anyway, let's get a move on. Sorry if I hate your favorite dungeon, my bad.
Disappointment in the game of life!
I honestly wasn't sure if I should even count the Forsaken Fortress. I mean, it's kind of broken up into 2 visits, and neither of them are really all that compelling or fun. It's technically the first dungeon you go to in Wind Waker, except the entire thing is just an awkward stealth segment since you arbitrarily lost your sword. And if you get caught by someone, you don't even get to run or try to escape. You're just instantly thrown in jail. Except when you encounter the enemies operating the spotlights, cause then I guess you can knock their weapons out of their hands and fight them. But you can't do that with the moblins patrolling the hallways. No, let's not get crazy now. I mean, what is there really to say? It's just kind of an underwhelming and unfun slog that doesn't even end in a boss fight. Just an encounter with a bunch of regular enemies. You don't even get a heart container from it, so like, clearly it doesn't count for the purposes of this list. With that said, however, you do return to the Forsaken Fortress later in the game, where you even acquire a new item, use it on the boss, and get a heart container. Meaning I guess this place ultimately does count as a dungeon thanks to the second visit. And I'm impressed, Wind Waker! It's even worse than last time! See, at least that first time, you had to figure out how to get to each spotlight in order to turn them off and progress through the fortress. There was also legitimate danger and stakes from you having to sneak around without getting caught by anyone. The second time around, there's no danger of getting caught and no real puzzles. You just make your way to the same place you went before. Except this time, there are some roadblocks in your way you need to pound with a hammer. It's still boring. Arguably even worse than it was the first time you came here. The only real saving graces are the foreboding atmosphere. It definitely feels like the hostile hideout of Ganondorf. And the boss battles on offer here. Phantom Ganon has an even cooler design than his Ocarina of Time counterpart. And the tennis you play with him is a lot more fluid and fun. And finally getting to smash the Helmarok King's face in with a hammer is deliciously satisfying. As is the chase scene where you have to get to higher ground as he destroys the floor behind you. I will indeed acknowledge that the Forsaken Fortress does indeed have hype moments and aura, but aside from those brief, shining moments, I kind of just don't like it. There aren't really any puzzles, progression isn't interesting, the stealth is annoying. Why couldn't we have gone to a good dungeon twice? Oh well, I can't really say I despise this place, but that's just because it's too uninteresting for me to despise.
Personally, I prefer the air.
Divine Beast Va Meadow is genuinely kinda pathetic. I don't think it's atrocious to play or anything, but it's so embarrassingly simple even by the low standards of the Divine Beasts. The entire thing can be beaten in half an hour. Hell, less if you really know what you're doing. Out of the 5 terminals that make up the entirety of the dungeon's content, only 2 of them gave me mild pause as I pieced together the pretty standard puzzles required to access them. The other 3 terminals, 60% of the dungeon's content, are practically there in plain sight without you having to do much of anything to get to them. Rotating the angle of the bird is pretty nifty, sure, but it's so damn simple and doesn't really add a whole lot as a gimmick. The boss, Windblight Ganon, is absolutely nothing to write home about. You play one Blight Ganon, you've played them all, who cares? The only thing I really remember about this dungeon is how much I kinda like shield surfing all the way from one end of the bird to the other. Whee! Other than that, yeah, this is nothing. It would be fine enough as the first required dungeon, still on the simple and short side compared to every other first dungeon in the series, but I guess relatively passable. The thing is though, this is not the required first dungeon. This could be the last one you end up doing, which makes its pitiful level of difficulty even worse. I mean, this dungeon is lucky I always do it first anyway, just so I can get Rivali's Gale. But even so, I mean, the Great Deku Tree is more complex than this. An absolute ball of nothingness, aside from how fun it is to shield surf on it after killing the boss.
Why do I look like an elephant?
At first, I was decently excited to revisit Divine Beast Va Ruta, because out of all of them, I remember this one having the neatest gimmick with the elephant trunk you're able to extend and destend in order to pour water on certain areas. I remember this one being the most interesting and complex of the 4, so I was interested in reliving what it had in store for me. Oh, I beat it in 20 minutes, the entire dungeon. They took a cool and decently complex gimmick with the elephant trunk, and they barely utilized it. Instead, this was just another piss-easy, short dungeon. Oh, Breath of the Wild, you're nailing these, buddy. You're doing such a great job. At least with this one, each of the terminals is tied to its own puzzle. I especially like the one inside the spinning wheel where you have to use stasis in order to keep a ball in place that keeps the door to the terminal open. The one where you have to use a magnetic crank to open the door and then for the elephant water on some flames is fun too. And I especially enjoy going outside and climbing onto the elephant's trunk to get one of the terminals. They are all decently spread out as well. This does at least feel like a moderately large divine beast that's fairly fun to explore. But with that said, it's just so easy and short. It frustrates me because unlike the gecko and the bird, this one had the potential to be a little bit more complex, and yet it completely squanders it. It's nothing! The boss is worthless as usual! How did they fumble the bag with these divine beasts this bad? Whatever, let's just keep moving on. We'll get to the real dungeons soon enough.
Lizard, lizard, lizard.
Divine Beast Va Rudanya is just more of the same. I can't stress enough that if you played one of these divine beasts, you played them all. With that said, despite the fact that it's the smallest one, I didn't rank it last because it has a couple unique attributes. It starts out with this pitch black segment, which isn't amazing or anything, but it's something different, having to light these blue flames on your way to the map. And while a few of the terminals can't really be described as having puzzles attached, there are a few others that do pick up the slack with some of my favorite divine beast puzzles. In particular, carrying a blue flame to the outside so you can activate a ball that rolls down this shaft through the interior is kinda neat. And the terminal behind the flame wall is the only puzzle in any dungeon I talked about so far that actually stopped me in my tracks for more than 2 seconds. They hide the solution to it pretty well. Other than that, yeah, it's painfully short and bland still. Tilting this thing 90 degrees is probably the least compelling gimmick out of all the divine beasts, and the boss is really forgettable even by the low standards of the Blight Ganons. Yeah, I don't know, these spots are pretty interchangeable. The main thing you should take away from this is divine beasts bad.
Ah, Jim. Robot camels.
Okay, last one, just stay with me. Divine Beast Va Naboris isn't all that great, and yet it's still by far better than the other 3 Divine Beasts in the base game of Breath of the Wild. It's the only one that actually kinda feels like a dungeon. Like, there are rooms you have to progress through in a somewhat linear order to get to a couple of these terminals. And while this dungeon still didn't really take me that long to complete, I at least had to think about where I was going and what I was doing for longer than 5 seconds. These rotating cylinders in the center of the beast do actually take a modicum of brain power to wrap your head around. And overall, I enjoyed exploring the camel humps and climbing the beast's exterior at various times. We also can't forget that the boss of this dungeon, Thunder Blight Ganon, is kind of the only blight worth a damn. The only one that's actually challenging, but not to the point where it's unfair. Okay, maybe it's a little unfair, but whatever. It's decently satisfying to get better at dodging and flurry rushing his lightning fast attacks. Overall, this still pales in comparison to a real dungeon, but it's by far Breath of the Wild's best attempt at one. Congrats, you made one that's finally average instead of below average. I knew you had it in you, buddy.
Too bad, SpongeBob, you gotta ride the eel.
Out of every single dungeon on this list, there's only one where replaying it, I needed to be glued to a guide at almost all times because of how needlessly confusing and obtuse it was. That dungeon, of course, being the Water Temple from Twilight Princess, also known as the Lakebed Temple. This place is annoying. Even when I actually know what I'm doing, it's annoying. Having to manipulate this staircase in the central room and figure out a way to get water flowing here is not fun. Maneuvering your way around this place before you acquire the claw shot is not fun. There's this one labyrinth-like room that you have to slowly navigate through underwater in order to get the big key, and this room in particular. I spent almost an hour just in this one room, and it sucked. You might assume this is all a skill issue, but there are difficult and labyrinthian dungeons in this series that I have ranked a lot higher because their atmosphere is great, and it's satisfying to get the hang of navigating through them. Lakebed Temple is just so boring thematically, with a forgettable music track and nothing to make it stand out from any other water dungeon in the series. I like the parts where you slide on water, I like the one piece of heart where you have to claw shot to the chandelier in the central room, and the boss fight against Morpha too is surprisingly pretty fun. That's pretty much everything I enjoy about this place. It's just a miserable slog otherwise. I don't know, to me this is everything the people who complain about the two N64 water temples say that those are. At least the atmosphere in those dungeons are memorable. What are you gonna remember about Lakebed Temple? What will this dungeon have in 500 years? Bad. I don't like this place. It sucks. I'm only ranking it above the Divine Beasts because Morpheal is cool. Alright, I'm gonna go create a website solely dedicated to helping people navigate that terrible room in Lakebed Temple and nothing else. Good thing Squarespace can help me with that. Squarespace is a wonderful online website builder that enables you to create beautiful websites for your business or personal hobby. I adore how easy they make it to showcase your expertise and engage clients with video content on your website. You can make stunning video libraries and even monetize your content by adding a paywall. Perfect for online courses, exclusive tutorials, and premium workshops. If you want to get discovered fast, that's where integrated Squarespace SEO tools come in. Every website is optimized to be indexed with meta descriptions, an auto-generated sitemap, and more, letting you pop up more often on search engines and attract way more customers. Squarespace also offers lots of built-in donation tools. You can create a professional, on-brand website that makes it easy to accept one-time or recurring contributions, and engage your supporters. Use built-in email campaigns and marketing tools to connect with your community and inspire more people to support your cause. Check out squarespace.com/ShayFrillis for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use promo code ShayFrillis to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
You know I can handle it.
The Fire Temple from Tears of the Kingdom is embarrassing. Never in Zelda history has a dungeon been this easy to cheese and just not engage with whatsoever. The vast majority of the gameplay challenge here is riding these minecarts to get to all the different buildings that house the gongs for you to whack with Yonobo. So yeah, you could navigate this somewhat confusing maze of minecart tracks, or you could just, build a flying machine and just fly to every single one of these gongs. On my most recent playthrough, I challenged myself to see if I could beat the entire dungeon without touching a minecart once. And yes, extremely easily. Honestly, that was kind of the optimal way to beat the place. Just to be safe though, I went back and redid the entire dungeon the normal way, trying not to let the cheese method affect its placement in the ranking. But like I alluded to earlier, doing so is honestly more frustrating than fun. I just don't enjoy hitting all these switches to get the minecarts to go where I want them to. And once you reach your destinations, the puzzles are just so basic. The only one that gave me any pause to figure out was the one where you have to drop in from the top of the tower and dive down to the first floor. That was kind of interesting, but otherwise, wow, we need to build a ramp for Yonobo. Oh, so crazy, man. How am I ever gonna pull this off? I'll give this place some credit, because at least it's a bit more expansive than the Divine Beasts. And as frustrating as it is that it's so easy to cheese, I mean, let's be honest, figuring out you can cheese it and then doing so is pretty fun. I also think the marbled Goma fight is really cool. Breaking its legs off with the Yonobo is a blast, and it just has a very memorable design. Other than that, this dungeon really sucks. It's a great indication as to how much the non-linear dungeon structure employed by this duology just does not work all that well. You can dress this up like a real dungeon all you want, but that honestly just makes it even more pathetic.
Into the woods! Into the woods!
The Forbidden Woods are really, really interesting. They're so great and fun and... yeah, I don't really care about this dungeon that much. It's just so dreary without really being all that atmospheric. Flying around with the Deku Leaf and throwing nuts at doors to open them can be kind of fun, but for the most part, these are just standard overgrown woods with kind of annoying enemies and no real surprises. I found exactly one element of this dungeon novel, and that's the puzzle where you have to use the boomerang to cut the vines of this tree structure and send it hurtling to the basement. Okay, that was kind of cool. Otherwise, I mean, the dungeon boss, Kale Demos, sure is colorful. Not really a good or challenging boss in any way, but man is he colorful. I don't really have anything else. This has got to be the most forgettable dungeon in Wind Waker. At least it had nuts, I guess.
The wind.
I am not going to be making any friends today with Wind Waker fans. Guys, I swear, I really like this game. It's very fun and endearing, and I always have a huge smile on my face when I play it. Except when I'm in a dungeon, because with one exception we'll get to later, I just think the dungeon roster in this game is uniformly average. I'm sorry. Like, I really thought I was going to enjoy the Wind Temple this time around, but it is just really boring and tedious for some reason. Makar is an okay companion, but it just feels more like you're babysitting him rather than exploring this place together like how it is with Medley. His gimmick of planting trees for you to hookshot onto isn't really that compelling, and his flying controls are noticeably stiff and awkward. Again, Medley's flying controls are perfectly fine. I don't know why Makar's are so cumbersome. You also get separated from him for a while in this dungeon, which, on the one hand, that means less tedious use of the command melody. That's kind of a plus. But also, I thought the unique gimmick of this place was having Makar and being able to control him. You kind of don't do that for a large chunk of the middle. The central room with a big fan is kind of cool, but it can also be tedious trying to navigate which door you need to go to on which level, and getting both Link and Makar there. Don't even get me started on the block pushing puzzles. There are two of them that I just find so dull. Add in a plethora of annoying enemies, most of which you've already seen before, and a boss fight which is conceptually awesome, but just ends up being really annoying since I found it so hard to lock onto Molgera's tongue with all of his minions getting in the way. It's difficult for the worst reason, and I had such a bad time with it. I'm sorry, I know the boss music is peak. I just wish I liked the boss that it was attached to. This dungeon definitely has a couple of hype moments in aura. I like the mini-boss fight against the Master Wizrope or whatever, and the realization that the door you're looking for in the bottom floor of the main room is underneath the fan is pretty satisfying. Navigating the dungeon can be pretty complex and interesting. It's not awful or anything, it just had so many annoyances that got in the way of me fully enjoying it. I like the little noises Makar makes when he walks, if that's worth anything to you.
Dodongo just like smoke.
Dodongo's Cavern has always been a fine but forgettable second dungeon for Ocarina of Time to call its own. It's like, compared to the thematically unique and expertly laid out starter dungeon that is the Great Deku Tree, here it's like, what's the first thing you think of when you hear the word dungeon? Yeah, probably saying like this. It's so standard. Not bad, mind you, but there's practically nothing about it that sticks out in your mind after you're done, or even as you're playing it, really. I suppose it is fun getting to play around with bombs for the first time. They even give them to you for free. You don't even need to have enough rubies, which is nice. Other than that, you kind of just go in a straight line for a while with no real need to ever figure out where to go or what to do next. There aren't really any novel puzzles. You fight the same mini-boss twice, and it's just two Lizalfos. King Dodongo himself is kind of fun to chuck bombs into the mouth of, but mostly he's just pretty easy and repetitive. I don't really want to come across as a hater of this dungeon. It's just the standard, pretty much. It's a moderately fun, fine time, and a solid enough second big challenge for you to undertake. More or less the perfect average for the dungeons in this series, with nothing else I even have to say about it.
Cause clean is better than dirty.
Well, it's finally time to talk about the dreaded Water Temple. I think I speak for everyone when I say the clear biggest problem with this dungeon is that it's way too short and easy. By the way, I'm talking about the Tears of the Kingdom water temple. I remember playing this for the first time and thinking, wow, that was it? That's not to say I don't have fun here. I honestly think all 4 of the puzzles to activate the terminals are pretty good, with some of them making pretty fun use of recall. The low gravity also makes this place pretty memorable too. But there just isn't really a whole lot to this dungeon, unfortunately. Reaching the terminals is incredibly easy, and the atmosphere in this quote-unquote temple is non-existent. Seriously, you call this a temple? It's just a bunch of floating platforms. No different from the floating platforms we went on to get here, really. Sidon also has by far the most boring ability. Like, dude, I don't need your water. I have a bunch of splash fruit in my inventory. I'm good. The boss fight against Muktarok, though, is decently fun, and like I said earlier, the puzzles are pretty solid, which is why I enjoy this place far more than the Fire Temple. I don't dislike it or anything, but I also can't really justify ranking it higher than anything else.
It's the symbol of the gods.
On my most recent playthrough of Wind Waker, the Tower of the Gods was when it really hit me, man, dungeons are not this game's strong suit, are they? Don't get me wrong, it's hard to call any of this game's selection outright bad, but I'm not exactly foaming at the mouth to revisit these fairly unimaginative puzzles that revolve around commanding and carrying little statue guys through various rooms. There are a couple fun puzzles, like this one involving scales, but there are also a couple that kind of annoy me, like this room where you have to carry a torch across these blocks in the water. But oh, you gotta make sure the blocks are properly spaced, and you gotta make sure to time it right with the tide so that your flame doesn't go out. Oh, isn't that cool? No. It's kind of drawn out and tedious in all honesty. And I feel like that can describe quite a few of the things you do in this place. Even elements that should be cool, like the fact that this is the only dungeon in the game you can bring the King of Red Lions into. That's neat in theory, but in practice, it's a little cumbersome using him to cruise around this place with no wind to make you go faster. The commands melody is really cool in later dungeons that are not this one, since you get to use it on actual characters there, and here it's just these dinky statues. Alright, I hate to be so negative. This dungeon is still ultimately okay. The atmosphere is pretty great. This place absolutely feels like an ancient and foreboding test that the gods have laid out for you. And the boss fight against Andross at the end is genuinely really fun. I mean, it's a tried and true Nintendo trope of just shooting hands, but the way Link shoots these hands is just so fluid. Plus, if you ever run out of arrows, the boss will shoot some more out of his nose. How kind of him to share his snot arrows with us. Yeah, I suppose this place is a bit of a mixed bag that doesn't fully live up to its legendary status in universe, but it's still a solid enough dungeon. I bet you forgot about this one, huh? To this day, the only dungeon in the entire Zelda series to be DLC. The final trial from Breath of the Wild is honestly the game's best dungeon for a couple key reasons. Yeah, maybe another fairly short one where you just have to activate a bunch of terminals, but the difference here is that the puzzles attached to these 4 terminals are more elaborate than anything you'll come across in a Divine Beast. I was actually stopped in my tracks by some of them on my 3rd and most recent playthrough of this dungeon. This is the only dungeon in Breath of the Wild that took me more than an hour to beat, so, you know, that's something. On top of the upgrade in complexity, this dungeon has by far the greatest boss in the entire game. Imagine playing through Breath of the Wild and seeing these monks at the end of the shrines 120 times. You kind of get used to them as these immobile, mummified statue things. So when this one started moving, I figuratively shit myself. Monk Maz Koshia is an insanely intense boss with so many ridiculous tricks and devastating attacks. It feels like a more than worthy final trial for completing this entire DLC campaign. And as a reward for beating this dungeon, you're granted the Master Cycle, perhaps the coolest thing in the entire game. This absolutely outclasses the Divine Beasts for so many reasons, but with that said, it's still kind of average overall because there's not really flow to it. It's still just going to each individual terminal one at a time, and it's pretty short with boring aesthetics. But at least the boss and Master Cycle are cool. Now it's time to talk about the Earth Temple.
Which one?
Oh, the Skyward Sword one? Why is it called the Earth Temple? It's clearly made of lava. It should be the Lava Temple. Anyway, this is a fine but pretty basic and forgettable dungeon overall. It kind of feels like a souped up version of the Dongo's Cavern in a lot of ways, featuring all that lava, bombs as your new item, a mini boss battle against the pair of Lizalfos, and an ending boss battle against the guy you toss bombs into the mouth of to get him stunned. Yeah, it's a little lame and unimaginative, unimaginative that we're still doing this with a bomb-based boss 13 years after King Dodongo, and that feeling is compounded considering how much more basic Scaldera feels compared to the stellar first boss, Girahim. Aside from that, using bombs to blow holes in the wall is fun, as is rolling through the lava on this giant ball. I'm honestly shocked this thing doesn't use motion controls similar to the rolling ball in Mario Galaxy. Like, knowing Skyward Sword, I would have assumed that they just couldn't help themselves and would have added it in. Oh well. It's pretty fun to move around on this thing with the control stick. The boulder section is decently memorable, and it's overall not a bad dungeon, but I think it's a short step back from the first dungeon in Skyward Sword in terms of complexity. I beat it in 30 minutes on my most recent playthrough, and like, I don't know, that's the length I expect from a child dungeon in Ocarina of Time. Still decently fun to go through, but one of the lesser dungeons in Skyward Sword.
As a child, I yearned for the mines.
Goro?
It's those second lava dungeons, man. Why are they always so average? The Goron mines are a fine but pretty standard lava dungeon without a ton of memorable elements. It is pretty cool to walk on the ceilings using the newly magnetic iron boots, even if it is a bit slow, but oh well, it's not that bad. The theme is kinda neat since you have all this mining equipment and all these cranes strewn about. I like how you have to find 3 super old Gorons who give you pieces of the boss key. That's cute. And the mini boss battle where you have to grab this Goron and chuck him into the lava is a blast. Honestly, it's a lot more interesting than the pretty forgettable final battle of the dungeon against Pyrus. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I had a good time with the dungeon while I was in it, and then the second I warped out of there, I kinda forgot everything that happened in it. Even the dungeon item, I mean, it's literally just the bow, and you just use it for the standard shooting switches and ropes purpose. Not really much to write home about here. You just get in and you get out. It's never bad or annoying, but it's never particularly spectacular.
See that palace of Twilight?
Honestly, I kinda forgot the Palace of Twilight existed. For a game with arguably the best roster of dungeons in the entire series, the final one in Twilight Princess is kind of a wet fart. Entirely linear, mainly revolving around 2 passageways where all you do is carry this light orb back the way you came and hope it doesn't get grabbed by the wall master. It can certainly be very tense with the dramatic music cues as Master Hand approaches, but overall this just really isn't that interesting. It gets a little more fun when your sword is imbued with light and you can tear down walls of darkness in your path, and the final fight against Zant is cool, if a bit overrated. Seriously, I remember back in the day people would call this the greatest 3D Zelda boss fight of all time. And like, it's fun. It's also a rehash of 5 other bosses we already fought, but you know, it's funny when he grows really big, I guess. Speaking of Zant though, I really could not take the enemies in this dungeon that are literally just a giant version of his head seriously. I don't know, this place really isn't bad, and the second half is definitely more enjoyable, but it's just kind of an underwhelming last full dungeon in the game. I honestly remember the Hyrule Warriors version of the Palace of Twilight a lot more. Maybe because I played that map like 80 times over the course of the game's adventure mode, but hey, that still tells you something, I guess.
Grappling hook!
Dragon Roost Cavern is a fine enough starter dungeon since I don't count your first trip to the Forsaken Fortress. You call that a dungeon? That was just a bunch of stealth bullshit! But yeah, back to Dragon Roost Cavern. It's okay, I guess. I like the overall gloomy, lava-filled aesthetic. It definitely captures that cavernous vibe. A lot better than Dodongo's Cavern could in Ocarina. The parts where you go outside are especially really cool and memorable to me. It really makes you feel like you're scaling this mountain. And I like the gladiatorial pit where you have to rescue Medley. Making use of the grappling hook to swing around could be pretty fun as well. And I like how there's a small key just sitting in a bird's nest. Silly! Despite all these positives, it's still a pretty flaccid dungeon at the end of the day. The puzzles mostly consist of light torches. Oh wow, crazy. There is one pretty cool puzzle where you have to cut the ropes off a bridge in order to reach a chest below you, but that's about it. Feels a little bit like going through the first dungeon motions at times. Not bad, but just pretty basic. The boss battle against Goma is especially pathetic. Cool design, and I love the sight of Link swinging on Valu's tail. But man, it is practically impossible to get hit by this guy. You could say a similar thing about Ocarina of Time, Goma, but at least you reach that dungeon in the first 10 minutes of the game and not 3 hours in. I don't know. Definitely not a bad dungeon by any means, but not anything to write home about.
I would really like to see a tree.
Inside the Deku Tree is the earliest possible dungeon to reach in any 3D Zelda game, usually becoming accessible for you a mere 10 10 to 20 minutes after gaining control of Link. So aside from your time playing around in Kokiri Forest getting the sword and shield, this dungeon is your first real introduction to a lot of the gameplay Ocarina of Time has to offer. Fighting enemies, opening treasure chests, aiming and shooting at shit with a slingshot, it's all here in a dungeon with a lot of verticality, which is really novel to see considering this is the introduction to Zelda in a 3D space. It's also dripping with atmosphere. Obviously not as much as any of the adult dungeons in this game, but it's so quiet and almost eerie with all these mysterious wooded passageways and ambient background music. It's a real far cry from the vibrant vibes of Kokiri Forest, strengthening the idea that this is your first real test as a player. It's obviously very simple. Pretty much every puzzle boils down to, hey, did you know you can burn spider webs? Anyway, here's a spider web and a torch. Good luck figuring out what to do. There's nothing mind-bending here, but again, you've literally been playing the game for less than an hour at this point. I think this level of simplicity is justified. It's a decently fun starter dungeon with a really cool and unique setting. The 23 is number 1 bit is iconic, and as simple as Goma is to defeat, it still has an imposing enough design to make for a memorable and creepy first encounter. Despite its simplicity, I would still rank it far above every Divine Beast, because it has something they could never have. Flow. Every puzzle and room flows into the next one naturally. It's not a bunch of random, disconnected puzzles you complete in any order. It also has a cool theme, which not a single one of the Divine Beasts aspired to. Sorry I keep picking on them. I played Breath of the Wild for this video first, and then I wrote a lot of the other segments with the Divine Beasts fresh in my memory. Oh well, it's not like anyone really likes them that much, so it's no big deal. I like Inside the Deku Tree. I obviously can't rank it super high, but it deserves a lot of credit for how well it kicks off the adventure.
We're in a monster's belly!
You know, I genuinely wasn't expecting to like Jabu Jabu's Belly the best of the 3 Ocarina of Time child dungeons. But on this most recent playthrough, it just feels the most interesting. I mean, there really is no other dungeon in the series like this. Getting to explore this disgusting monster's belly. Just look at these textures, man. I mean, whoa, this is trippy. It also takes a bit of effort to navigate and to piece together the fact that using the boomerang to kill these fleshy penises will open up new areas. Speaking of which, the boomerang is such a fun item to use. I love flinging it at all the enemies in this dungeon. But you know what's even more fun to fling at enemies? Princess Ruto herself. I seriously have so much fun throwing her at these bubbles in order to pop them. Oh yeah, Ruto makes for a great addition. A slightly annoying, but overall adorable little tyke who you need to rescue. But rather than be an annoying escort mission partner, she's more of a fun prop to carry around and, like I said, throw at people. Pretty fun overall. I will say, I honestly kind of hate the mini-boss here. This giant Octorok you have to take down in the worst boss arena known to man. But the big boss of the arena, Baronade, more than makes up for that by being by far the most dynamic of the child dungeon boss fights. Yeah, overall, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I like Jabu Jabu's Belly. Still on the short and simple side, not really much to write home about, but a fun little misadventure with your fish friend before the two of you inevitably definitely get married for real. Yep, totally.
Yo, Shinji, get in the robot!
The Spirit Temple, or rather the Construct Factory where the bulk of the gameplay is, which culminates with the Spirit Temple that only consists of a boss fight. This is the final dungeon in the 3D Zelda games so far, and what a way to piss out. I think it's pretty decent for what it is. It's just that what it is isn't a whole lot, really. You're tasked with collecting the limbs that'll form the basis for the mech that houses Minaru's spirit. And each limb is in a rectangular container that you need to bring through some puzzle rooms in order to get it back outside and attach it to the main body. It's certainly a very creative take on a dungeon, and I appreciate the forced linearity in these segments. I feel like the dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom really could have used more of that. Getting these limbs out can be decently fun and rewarding, though also a bit repetitive at times. Having to travel to the entrance of each depot is a bit of a time-consuming nuisance. And the segment after you build the mech where you have to slowly drive Minaru to the Spirit Temple is kinda lame. At least the boss fight is pretty cool and unique, kind of a fun tribute to Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Pretty solid for what it is, but like I said, it's not the best structured dungeon in the world, and it's pretty easy to forget about.
Water!
Wow!
Water!
Wow!
Water!
Wow!
For this video, I started replaying the Water Temple at midnight, and I got done at 3:30 in the morning, baby! I really do want to love this dungeon. It has tremendous atmosphere and a ton of memorable set pieces, but it is just too damn labyrinthian for its own good. The The Water Temple experience basically boils down to missing a small key in some random corridor somewhere and not knowing which water level you have to set the place on in order to grab said key. I should know, that exact experience happened to me 3 times on this most recent playthrough. It's a dungeon whose complexity is initially satisfying when you manage to figure out how to manipulate the water to get where you want to go, but then that satisfaction gives way to tedium as you start to go insane the longer you're here. There are a lot of great, fun, memorable rooms, like the waterfall one where you have to hookshot to different targets in order to climb it, the passageway where you have to avoid the whirlpools, the super cool room where you fight Dark Link, who is kinda overrated and barely a functional fight, but the room looks cool, and some other ones presumably. Guys, it's 3:40 now. I am so tired. Don't make me think about the Water Temple any more than I have to. Ultimately, despite the vast potential for frustration within this place, I was tempted to bump it up a few places in the ranking, because it does have a ton of rooms and puzzles that positively stick out in my mind, as well as a serene and mystical atmosphere. But there's one thing that really holds this dungeon back for me, and that's the boss. Oh my god, I hate Morpha. This is the stupidest, most frustrating, and yet most boring fight in the entire game. It's just water! You're fighting water! Not even a cool sea creature like a squid or a shark or something. It's just water, and you hookshot the little thing and attack it, and it never increases in difficulty or becomes more interesting as the fight goes on. What a miserable ending to a fine enough dungeon. It's absolutely a mixed bag, but I think it's a very unique and mostly enjoyable time. Except when you're looking for a lost key, that shit sucks. Oh, and the Iron Boots thing on the N64 version is fine. A little annoying, and the 3DS version is a definite improvement there, but genuinely, it's not even in the top 5 worst things about this dungeon. You're gonna be pausing the game to check the map a bunch anyway, so what if you need to do that to take your boots on and off? I've always maintained that Skyward Sword has one of the best dungeon rosters in the whole series, and that can be exemplified right away by the fact that even its starter dungeon is pretty well above average. Skyview Temple is a more than solid start to this game's dungeon roster, spouting a great rundown aesthetic, tons of satisfying spider webs to cut down, and a difficulty level that's not too easy nor too annoying. The dungeon tells you have to search for gemstones in order to raise the water level, offering vague hints as to where to find them without outright giving their locations away. I think it's a decently satisfying challenge tracking these things down without making you want to pull your hair out with frustration. But as if this first part of the dungeon wasn't solid enough, you soon acquire the item of the dungeon, the Beetle. Yeah, so this is kind of the most fun thing ever. A drone for you to pilot all around the place in order to hit high switches and maybe terrorize some enemies if you're up for that. Genuinely such a great item. I really need it back in the series. But with that said, instead of doing the traditional Zelda dungeon thing of using your new item against the boss, you're instead thrown straight into a confrontation with the game's main villain, Girahim. He isn't weak to beetles like some pussy. Instead, he challenges you to a straight-up sword duel, which can actually be pretty tricky to get the hang of, especially for a first boss. It's a real trial by fire situation that forces you to learn the intricacies of the sword motion controls on the spot. Or else Girahim will swipe your sword straight out of your hands and use it against you. What a scamp. This is an amazing confrontation both story and gameplay wise. In fact, it honestly kind of overshadows the rest of the dungeon. But don't get it twisted, Skyview Temple is overall very solid. I'm also going to be courteous to it and not factor in your second trip there where you have to get the stupid water for the stupid water dragon. I don't really think that's the same as visiting the Forsaken Fortress twice. It's very clearly just an isolated incident of Skyward Sword's world famous love of padding. When do we get to the gameplay? This is the gameplay! Yippee! The Fire Sanctuary often gets a bad rap solely because it has to follow up 2 truly exceptional dungeons in Skyward Sword. And it's not exactly exceptional itself. It's pretty decent though. I love the overall look of the place and how many outdoor areas there are. And having to manipulate the flow of lava so you can basically ride across it on these stones is pretty fun. I like using the water fruits to kill these lava hand dudes. Tunneling underground with the magma mitts is a fun way to vary up the gameplay. And the magmas do look pretty silly chained up like that over lava. There's definitely a lot to enjoy about this place. I just think its main issue is that it's a little standard, especially by the incredibly high standards of Skyward Sword dungeons. It's fun fun, it's varied, it's lengthy, but I already kind of ran through the main bullet points of what I like about it, and I honestly don't know what else to say. Maybe it would be a lot more memorable if it just had a really exceptional and cool boss, but the boss is just Girahim again. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad fight, far from it, it's just, again? This is the only 3D Zelda dungeon to have a repeated boss battle. While I like how there are multiple Girahim fights, I don't know, this feels like a bit of a weird place to put the second one. Maybe you could have fought him at the end of the Linearu mining facility after Zelda and Impa go back in time. That would have really sold how angry he was at you. I don't know, maybe they just ran out of development time to give the Fire Sanctuary a more thematically fitting boss. Fair enough, I guess. Pretty solid dungeon, not a lot more though.
There's no place to raise a monkey!
Look, Twilight Princess, you can't just name one of your dungeons the Forest Temple. That's just setting it up for inevitable disappointment. You seriously can't have another Forest Temple again. That name is sacred. Honestly, the whole place is so heavily focused on monkeys, you should have just called it the Monkey Temple. Or, I don't know, at least call it the Jungle Temple or something. Regardless, this place is pretty solid. Gradually rescuing each one of the monkeys who form a monkey chain that can help you reach new areas in the dungeon is a fun gimmick. The Gale Boomerang is a really fun twist on a classic item. And also, I completely forgot about this, but why is there a living fairy inside of it? Why does the boomerang need to talk to you? That's so random and it never gets addressed again. Oh well, it's pretty fun to latch onto targets and blow a gust of wind in their direction. And it gets even funner when you can use the Gale Boomerang to hand deliver bombs to various enemies, and even the boss of the dungeon, Dia Baba. A pretty solid fight, though I honestly prefer the mini-boss battle against the baboon with the big ass. I love ramming into his pillars and stunning him in order to get his boomerang to smack him in the face. An overall pretty fun time. Nothing all that crazy, but decently sprawling for a first dungeon without being overly complex. Plus, getting a little army of monkeys to follow you is worth the price of admission alone.
My name is Tulin.
The Stormwind Arc is a pretty good dungeon for... Oh, what's that? It's called the Wind Temple, even though we already had a Wind Temple in Wind Waker. Genuinely, why is it not just called the Stormwind Arc? That name rules. Plus, that's actually what it is. It's not a temple. Whatever. The Wind Temple is a pretty good dungeon for what it is. I definitely still have my reservations about its non-linearity. There isn't a ton of flow to it, but it is decently tricky and fun to navigate, despite not being all that large. It took me a while to figure out how to get to some of these terminals, and I wasn't frustrated during that process at all. It was much more of a satisfying aha moment, especially figuring out I needed to open the roof and fly through these lasers to get to one of them. Granted, not all the terminals are that hard to find. I mean, the one where you just attach an icicle to a lever and pull the lever right by the start of the dungeon is kinda lame. And I'm very mixed about the one that just consists of flying down to the bottom of the arc and nothing else. Like, that's decently clever, hiding it in plain sight, but also you could have attached a puzzle to it, maybe. I don't know. It is really fun exploring this place with Tulin, who is the best bird boy in existence, with by far the most fun ability to utilize. Strong Wind! The thing that really makes this dungeon rock, however, is the boss fight against Colgera. Easily one of the coolest battles in either of these games. Shooting his weak points in bullet time is so fun, and it gets so much better when that killer remix of Dragon Roost Island kicks in. I also feel like I can give this dungeon a bit of leeway, since the game heavily implies that this is the one you should check out first. A lot more than Breath of the Wild does with Va Meadow. So, by technically first dungeon standards, this one's pretty fun, with an exciting vibe and a ton of strong winds. I couldn't think of another thing to end that sentence with, sorry. The Lightning Temple is the closest Tears of the Kingdom gets to approximating a typical Zelda dungeon from one of the classic games. It's very atmospheric and delightfully claustrophobic, something that Breath of the Wild duology doesn't do nearly enough because they're obsessed with giving you freedom at every turn. Yeah, freedom exploring the overworld is great, but some focused and engaging dungeon design that isn't hilariously easy to cheese would be nice as a contrast. Fortunately, this place gets pretty close, like I said. I love spelunking with Riju and solving these light puzzles in the central room. It really does feel like good old-fashioned dungeon progression. But with that said, if you're clever enough, you can get to some terminals in alternate ways using Ascend. Hell, you can even use Ascend to get to the boss room early. The boss just won't be here to fight you. That's honestly pretty cool. As opposed to the Fire Temple, where cheesing the dungeon is far and away the better strategy that doesn't waste your time as much, here it feels like a fun supplement that doesn't actually take away from the dungeon's design. I like pretty much all the puzzles in this place to reach the 4 terminals. The problem is, well, there's only 4 terminals. I don't know why they cut the number down from the usual 5, but even if they didn't, it kind of feels like a waste to only have 4 spots you need to go to in this sprawling, multi-floor temple. They get the atmosphere and the gameplay so right, but then there just isn't enough of it. Like, the light puzzles here are cool, but the Earth Temple in Wind Waker had about the same amount of cool light puzzles on top of a ton of other cool stuff. I don't know why Tears of the Kingdom constantly shoots itself in the foot before it can give us a real top-tier dungeon. At least the boss fight with Queen Gibdo is pretty cool. I like shooting her with lightning. That's how I solve all my problems. So yeah, the Lightning Temple. It's the best dungeon in the Breath of the Wild duology, and it's still just like B tier. God, we need real dungeons back in the next game pronto. Only now have we hit our first dungeon from Majora's Mask. It's like this is my favorite game of all time or something. I've always considered Woodfall Temple to just be the generic starter dungeon of Majora's Mask that thematically pales in comparison to the other 3 really unique and cool ones. Is this a fair assessment? Absolutely not. Woodfall genuinely has a lot of great things going for it. From its odd and unsettling music, to how well it makes use of the insanely fun and underrated Deku form. This thing may have initially been a curse when it was forced upon you in Clocktown, where there weren't many opportunities to make use of its fun hovering abilities. But here, in a dungeon that gives you a ton of chances to fly and even fight mini-bosses with these Deku flowers, yeah, it's pretty fun, surprise surprise. The Majora's Mask dungeons also benefit from giving you optional stray fairies to find and collect. And while you could say that's a detriment for some of the harder dungeons with how tough it is to maneuver between rooms in order to grab these things, in Woodfall, it's only a boon, since it's pretty fun to track these things down without it being a hassle. I generally love the worn down and creepy atmosphere here, like that one pitch black room where Tattle tells you, "Be careful, I sense a lot of evil here." That's honestly kind of raw. It's one of the few parts of the otherwise pretty lighthearted Southern Swamp arc that creeps me out a bit. Oh, and I can't conclude this discussion without talking about the banger boss. Adalwa is just so great. Not a boss with an obvious weak point that you need the most recent item for like 90% of other Zelda bosses. Nah, he's just a big guy with a big sword, and you just gotta hit him however you want. Fly over him and drop Deku nuts. Shoot him with arrows. Whack him with your little dagger. Go crazy, man. The fact that he sings his own name throughout the entire fight is just the cherry on top. I am absolutely obsessed with this guy. He is so funny. Overall, Woodfall doesn't really get a lot of attention in the grand scheme of Majora's Mask, but it's absolutely my favorite starter dungeon, being pretty fun and satisfying by those standards. Not the best this game has to offer, but like, if the dungeons in this game peaked with the first one, that would also be really sad. So, you know, that's good. The Fire Temple from Ocarina of Time is more or less the textbook example of a good Zelda dungeon. It doesn't do anything truly exceptional, it doesn't have a crazy theme or gimmick or anything really. It's just good. Like, it's a fun time with some solid puzzles and it's a decently cool setting. I don't know, what else do you want from me? I think my favorite thing about this dungeon by far is the various captured Gorons you have to free from imprisonment. Like, when I think the Fire Temple, I think of the beautiful harp music accompanying that funny animation of them waddling away. More importantly, it's just nice to have a dungeon where you're constantly helping others and rescuing them from Ganon's clutches. It makes you feel like more of a hero of time. Pounding stuff with a hammer is pretty fun. That one dancing mini-boss who jumps in and out of the fire is kinda neat. And Volvagia is a pretty iconic big boss of the whole place. Yeah, I mean, I kinda don't know what else to say. This is easily the most straightforward of the Ocarina of Time adult dungeons. And while nothing about it is really bad, it also kinda just lacks anything truly exceptional or all that memorable. I play it, have fun, and then it ceases to stick in my mind an hour after I finish it. I did want to give special mention to the super cool Islamic chanting in the original version of the game though. I feel like playing the dungeon while hearing that would probably give it a little more flavor and memorability. But I've only ever played the re-releases of this game from the Wii Virtual Console onward. I feel like the fact that the original song is so inaccessible by modern standards means it can't really contribute towards my overall praise for this dungeon. Not that it would really move it by much, if at all. Overall, a good dungeon though.
Drop on the deck and flop like a fish!
I've seen a few Zelda dungeon rankings that kind of dismiss Great Bay Temple out of hand for being confusing or frustrating. Guys, I genuinely don't know what dungeon you were playing. Like, you just follow the colored pipes to get where you need to go. It genuinely is not that hard. The water temple, yeah, okay, I can see that being a frustrating ordeal due to all the small keys you can easily miss, and then have to backtrack and change the water levels to acquire. But here, I think they did a great job making that signature water dungeon complexity a lot more manageable. You just go through all the corridors you have access to, acquire the ice arrows, turn the central mechanism so it's going in the opposite direction, and then just go through the new corridors you have access to. Getting the Great Fairies isn't even that hard as long as you just use the mask and make sure you don't leave a room without grabbing them. Seriously, I know this dungeon looks intimidating and labyrinthian at first glance, but I genuinely think people way overblow how annoying it is. It's not! It's fun! I don't know what to tell ya! Okay, it's not the most compelling dungeon in the world, but it is pretty satisfying getting the water flowing through all these pipes and making platforms with the ice arrows to get around. The atmosphere is unlike any other dungeon in the series. I love this unique mechanical rhythm the place has going on. The mini bosses are pretty fun, and Gjorg... Okay, yeah, no, even I can't defend Gjorg. This is easily one of the worst 3D Zelda bosses. And he's terrible for different reasons in the N64 and 3DS versions, shockingly enough. Focusing on the N64 version though, gee, I sure do love shocking him with an arrow and then clunkily jumping back in the water to swim over to him and then electrocute him, only to have to go back out of the water and shoot him again, so I can jump back into the water and get him again. Oh, I hope he doesn't eat me. Oh, yep, he ate me. Okay, here we go. 10-second cutscene of this. Yippee. Yeah, he absolutely drags this place down a bit in the ranking. If he was just underwhelming or boring, I'd probably let it slide, but he's just such an actively unfun detriment to what's otherwise a really good and satisfying dungeon. Yeah, I said it. Leave this place alone, kids. It's super cool, except for the stupid fucking fish.
The Ocarina of Time opens up the Temple of Time, opens up the Temple of Time.
Guys, I don't know if you knew this, but the Temple of Time in Twilight Princess is actually a clever reference to a similarly named temple from a previous Zelda game. That game being Link: The Faces of Evil. What a tremendous nostalgic throwback walking through that time door is. I've seen some complaints over the years that Twilight Princess is too derivative of Ocarina of Time, but I don't think that's the case at all. It's a perfect spiritual successor that has a lot of its own identity, and nowhere is that more evident than with this version of Temple of Time. We get a nice burst of nostalgia at the very beginning, but then Twilight Princess moves on and makes an entirely new dungeon with an entirely new and fun item. Before we get it though, we gotta scale the tower in what is easily one of the most linear 3D Zelda dungeons. It certainly works here, and the puzzles to get through each room and open the next one are fun. But part of the joy of these dungeons is figuring out where you need to go next, which doesn't really come into play here at all. As a result, it can be a little mindless getting through here, but like I said, on a room-to-room basis, it's still enjoyable. The place really livens up though when you get the Dominion Rod and take control of this massive statue, backtracking through the rooms you already visited in order to get it to the bottom floor and open the way to the boss. That sounds like it wouldn't really be that much fun, but you truly underestimate the power of Big Smashy Hammer. Destroying obstacles and enemies that impeded your progress significantly on the way up with the press of a button is very satisfying. And I kind of like how the boss key isn't handed to you. You actually have to go out of your way for it, which makes up for how linear the rest of the dungeon is a bit. It all culminates with a killer boss fight against Armagoma. Again, what a great way to take a classic Ocarina of Time element and really build off of it in a unique way. I love the creepy, realistic spider look they go for here, and being able to punch it with these massive statues is a real blast. Ultimately, this is a very good dungeon. I think it mainly suffers a bit from coming after two phenomenal ones, but while it can't quite live up to their excellence, on its own, I still think it's a ton of fun.
Snowhead.
Okay, now we're getting to the truly great dungeons. One of the primary benefits of each of the first 3 dungeons of Majora's Mask is how they all revolve around the transformation masks, which are some of the most fun items to play around with in the series. And out of the 3, the Goron mask is easily my favorite, which already serves as a major point in Snowhead Temple's favor. I absolutely adore rolling around at the speed of sound to get from one side to the other, though admittedly it can be kinda easy to fall off these ramps and lose a lot of time, which, you know, you kinda need time in this game. Regardless, I honestly have a lot of fun navigating this place. Everything revolves around this central room with a massive tower that you can Goron punch segments of into oblivion. And that's satisfying every time. Moreover, I don't really find this place difficult to navigate, and yet it's also not straightforward and linear either. There are a ton of branching paths, as well as rooms you can come back to and find new goodies in once you get the fire arrow. Yeah, the dungeon items in this game are all arrows. It's kinda lame, honestly. But the fire arrows are a great tool to play around with. There's also a lot of creative uses for the Lens of Truth. Add in some goofy, fun mini-boss fights against Wizrow and an incredibly unique piano theme in the background that always reminded me of Charlie Brown for some reason. And you've got a dungeon that I always have a blast revisiting. Still not convinced? What if I told you fight Goat at the end? Goat! My goat! I love chasing after him and ramming him in the ass with my Goron spikes. Oh man, it's fun. There really is no other boss battle in the Zelda series like it. So yeah, suffice to say, I'm a pretty big fan of Snowhead. I mean seriously, Goron rolling is just fun. That's pretty much all there is to it. The City in the Sky is one of the longest and most complex dungeons in the series. But thankfully, I don't think it's all that difficult. At least, not as difficult as a lot of people say. I was honestly stuck for a while at the beginning, running around these first few rooms and desperately trying to figure out what the first bit of progress I needed to make was. But after consulting a guide to get me on the right track, I honestly didn't need to pull up that guide again for the rest of my playthrough of this place. Once you really get the hang of traversing this vast, heavenly city, figuring out what to do next comes pretty naturally. This place is an absolutely wonderful showcase for one of the most fun items in the entire series. The double claw shots. You don't think these are going to be that huge of an upgrade over a single claw shot at first, and then you start using them and you realize, no wait, this is peak. Zipping from target to grate to fan in an instant is one of life's greatest treasures. And figuring out you can weigh certain switches down with the iron boots is a great aha moment making use of a previous item. Something Twilight Princess could have done more often. On top of the gameplay being fun here, the atmosphere is so mysterious yet soothing. This place just feels ethereal, and its grand scale absolutely suits how much it was built up as the heavens. I love the look and feel of this place, especially the open air rooms. They appear in a lot of Twilight Princess dungeons, like Snow Peak or the Forest Temple, but I think they really fit in the best here. The boss fight against Argarok is also fun, though I don't know if it quite lives up to the massive hype everyone else assigns to it. It's very good, don't get me wrong, and the spectacle of fighting a dragon in this crazy storm is awesome. But a lot of this fight is slowly climbing up the same set of pillars with your claw shots. Stabbing him in the back feels visceral and incredible, but I don't know if it's quite as adrenaline filled for me as it is for everyone else. Overall, I really love this dungeon though. Maybe it does go on a bit too long, but I think the length suits such a late game area. Very wonderful. Even if it means more time spent with the creepy little bird gremlins. Why do they look like that, dude? I don't understand. The Earth Temple, the Wind Waker one, not the Skyward Sword one, is my pick for the best temple in Wind Waker by a fucking landslide. It's the only one where the game gets to really let loose and get dark for a change, introducing a ton of undead enemies in this dank, oppressive dungeon, including the Redeads, which are somehow creepier than they were in Ocarina of Time. I don't know how Wind Waker of all games managed that. But this dungeon is also unique because of its excellent use of light puzzles, first requiring you to redirect light with Medley's harp, then giving you access to create double beams of light with your very own mirror shield. Oh yeah, wait, let me back up. I forgot to mention, Medley's here with you. It's a lot cooler having her as a companion than Makar, no offense. I absolutely love flying around with her, and throwing her directly into walls never fails to crack me up. I'm sorry, I really shouldn't be doing this, but man is it so funny. Much like the Wind Temple, this dungeon suffers a bit from the annoying repeated use of the command melody. While it is definitely cool to play as Medley, maybe we could have done that with the press of a button instead of having to play a song every time. Oh well, I didn't complain much about equipping the iron boots in the Water Temple. simple, so it would be hypocritical to say that the command melody is a big problem here. Honestly, it's not, just a bit of a nitpick. The dungeon is also pretty linear, it's not exactly difficult to navigate through, and the puzzles aren't hard to figure out either, but man are they so satisfying to complete regardless. Especially that one large room with all the mirrors you have to put in place. Oh man, is it awesome to see this massive beam of light that results from this lengthy, yet fun sequence of mirror pushing. The boss fight is fun too, kind of a Zeldification of Boo Lossus from Luigi's Mansion. You slam the ghost against a spike and then chop up all the little ghosts. The optional hurricane spin really comes in handy here, which I think is super neat. Overall, a very fun and satisfying dungeon. It is a bit of a redux mashup of Ocarina of Time's Shadow and Spirit Temples, with a dash of the carrying Rudo gimmick from Jabu Jabu's Belly thrown in for good measure, but it definitely has enough of its own identity to stick out. It's a fun time, and Wind Waker's dungeon roster really needed this W. Lanayru Mining Facility is just straight up awesome, and for some reason I always forget that every time I'm not playing it. Skyward Sword obviously has two very popular fan favorite dungeons that a lot of people talk about, and I obviously remember how incredible they are. But damn, here's a dungeon revolving entirely around the amazing time stone mechanic. Changing the layout of these rooms from sand-colored and drab to these multicolored mechanical wonderlands is a real treat. There's a ton of fun bits, like running across these conveyor belts, keeping up with these moving minecart timeshift stones, and fighting these awesome robot enemies. I really like the one where he's a tower and you just chop him. That's pretty great. The same goes for this game's super unique take on the Armos, where you have to use the gust bellows to spin his top and get him to open his mouth. It's a little bit clunky, but it's just such a weird and wonderful idea that suits this dungeon to a T. Oh yeah, I should probably mention the Gust Bellows. Weirdly, one of my favorite items in Skyward Sword. I don't know why, man. Blowing away sand with this thing is just so satisfying in ways that don't make a whole lot of sense to me. But needless to say, the fact that this dungeon revolves around this thing is a plus in my opinion. The boss fight against Moldarark is pretty solid, and I also just like the cool, somber minecart ride past all these robot statues at the very end. It's just kinda got a good vibe to it. It's hard to think of much wrong with this place. I mean, I guess maybe there's too much sand? I know it's meant to contrast with the past version of the dungeon, but it can still be a bit much. And the music is a tad monotonous, but not bad, and it does suit the place. Yeah, overall, this place rules, and the game only gets better from here dungeon-wise.
You don't have the spirit.
The Spirit Temple is a super unique dungeon by Ocarina of Time standards, with you having to start it as a child and then finish it off as an adult. I wouldn't say this adds a ton from a gameplay perspective, but it is pretty cool and satisfying narratively. Vowing to work with Nabooru in the past, watching her get taken by the evil Turbo Grannies, and then finally figuring out what happened to her 7 years later. That reveal of her being the mini-boss you have to fight is so damn crazy and cool. And that's not even getting into all the neat stuff you encounter on your way to that semi-final battle. I'm a bit of a sucker for the light-based puzzles in this series. Like, something about redirecting light with a mirror shield is so damn satisfying in every game it appears in. It's absolutely no different here. And said fun puzzles are accompanied by some tremendous ethereal atmosphere and memorable iconography. The music is soothing and mysterious, and the central room with the snake-like goddess is wonderful. I especially love when you burn away her face with light. The boss battle against Twin Rova is also an absolute blast, and one of the game's highlights for sure. Something about charging 3 blasts of fire and ice to hit this old hag with really tickles my brain with how fun and satisfying it gets. I don't have a whole lot else to say. This dungeon honestly just hits all the right notes. Just complex enough without being confusing or annoying, brimming with atmosphere, and standing out from any other location in this game in the best way. You can hookshot onto the statue's nipples for some reason. Nowhere else on her body, just where the nipples would be. I, just thought I should bring that up.
Mambo time!
The Shadow Temple is just a deliciously dark descent into hell. Easily one of the best themed and most atmospheric dungeons, not only in Ocarina of Time, but in the entire series. I mean, just the flavor text you get here. Shadow Temple. Here is gathered Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred. I really appreciate how, for what is practically a kid's game, Nintendo did not skimp on adding some real dark texture to its locations and environments. Having one of the dungeons be a medieval torture chamber used by the Hyrulean Alien royal family just rules. The horror theme is present in every inch of this place, from the skull-lined walls to the scythes and guillotines to the abundance of spooky enemies. They even bring back the dead hand, which is like maybe top 10 most disturbing things Nintendo has ever made. The hover boots are a great choice for the dungeon item here. A ray of light that allows you to tread over the darkness. Plus, they're just surprisingly fun to use. I like how slippery they are. The heavy use of the lens of truth also lends itself well to great aha moments when you remember you have this thing. And both of these tools serve you well as you traverse the spooky and memorable set pieces in this dungeon. I especially like the giant guillotine obstacle course room and the underworld ferry meant to take you to your final destination. The main drawback I can think of with this dungeon is just how straightforward and easy it is. It's pretty linear and difficult to get lost, which don't get me wrong, that's great and all, but with a theme this intimidating, it's kind of weird how this is arguably the biggest cakewalk out of all 5 adult dungeons in Ocarina of Time. Even the Fire Temple is a little trickier to navigate than this one, which probably could have benefited from being a little more open with a little more alternate paths. This is absolutely not a deal breaker though, especially considering how strong the dungeon finishes with the Bongo Bongo boss fight. It's simple yet immensely effective, making great use of the shooting a boss's hands gimmick before that became an overused trope. And you're on a drum, whee! The Shadow Temple is great because it entrenches you in persistent horror, and also you can bounce on a bongo and zoom on the air with magic hover boots. Oh, and don't even get me started on the room where you play basketball with bombs. This place really has everything. Alright, this is where the dungeons truly get incredible. Stone Tower Temple is commonly considered the crown jewel of Majora's Mask dungeons. Oh, but Great Bay was too confusing for you guys? Look at this place! You flip the whole damn thing upside down! Do you know how long it took me to collect the stray fairies in here, since so many of the switches to reveal their chests end up revealing them upside down? This is still an S tier dungeon, don't worry. I'm just kind of surprised that this place is never really criticized for being too confusing, while Great Bay is. To be clear, I don't think either of them are too confusing. Miraculously in this dungeon's case, by the way. Despite how crazy the gimmick is, progression from one room to the next is pretty linear. Which, believe me, is a necessity to prevent you from getting too lost and disoriented from this whole flipping mechanic. The puzzles in each room are also solidly challenging. Like when you realize the way to get to the boss at the end is to hookshot to an upside down chest you made appear. That is so damn satisfying. Words could never do it justice. This dungeon also makes great use of all the transformation masks, really rounding out the Majora's Mask experience. It's deliciously atmospheric, being both majestic, yet off-kilter and bizarre. Honestly, the ideal tone you would want from this game's final dungeon. I don't think the use of the Elegy of Emptiness is too excessive, except when you need to switch the dungeon from upside down to right side up. I don't know why these blocks needed to be blocking the gem you have to shoot, but oh well. Very minor issue. The mini-boss battles against the Garo Master and Gomez are rad as hell. And while I don't think Twin Mold is that compelling of a boss, he's certainly not bad, and turning into a giant alone is a great capper on this dungeon. I suppose I will mention that conceptually, I like the lumbering punches and wrestling moves they added to the 3DS version. I do agree that the fight goes on for too long in that one, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as some people make it out to be. The best attribute of this dungeon, however, aside from how fun it is, how well it utilizes all the masks, and how clever it is for stacking 2 different versions of each room on top of each other, has got to be just how much awe it inspires in me. Very few things in this series hit as hard as seeing the sky beneath your feet, or the revelation that the statue in the central room was an upside-down Majora the entire time. There's a lot of interesting lore and theories people have come up with based on the subtleties within the architecture of this place. It just feels so rich with history, so carefully designed to convey so many compelling ideas that a lot of other Zelda dungeons just don't aspire to. Don't get me wrong though, that's not the reason Stone Tower Temple ranks so high on this list. The reason is because the animation of Link falling upside down is funny. Look at that, it looks like he lands on the sky. Oh, never change, N64 graphics.
Surfing on this sand here.
The Arbiter's Grounds is just outstanding on all fronts. Starting from the damn build-up to the dungeon, the way it ominously looms at the end of the cursed desert. I love the bit of gameplay before you reach it where you have to infiltrate the Bulbin camp. But of course, the actual dungeon itself is miraculously even better. Much like the Shadow Temple, this place is filled to the brim with death and spooky enemies. The dungeon takes cues from Ocarina of Time's Forest Temple and has you hunt 4 Poes, which is cool thanks to their creepy designs and the vicious way you take them down as Wolf Link. It's not quite as inspired as how it was in Ocarina, especially since it's a lot easier to find them all by tracking their scent, but this is pretty much just the warm-up in this dungeon. The second half involves finding the Spinner, an absurdly underused item that allows for such fun, pseudo-skateboarding exploration of this place. Anytime you're spinning on rails is an absolute blast, and you better believe this includes the incredible and beloved boss fight against Star-Lord.
Who?
The first phase is fun enough, but oh man, nothing compares to switching between rails as you dodge his fireballs. Oh, and I forgot to mention the mini-boss, Death Sword. His name is Death Sword. I don't think I need to elaborate on why this place is peak. I think much like the Shadow Temple, it's held back a tiny bit by how straightforward and relatively linear progression is. But the oppressive, ominous atmosphere and satisfying fun factor of the Spinner work overtime to make this easily one of the greatest 3D Zelda dungeons. I was thinking about putting Stone Tower Temple above it, but honestly, Twin Mold holds that place back a bit, while Star-Lord is just the greatest to ever do it. Magnificent dungeon.
You go to hell before you die.
The Ancient Cistern is an absolutely flawless dungeon in terms of concept and execution of said concept. This beautiful, pristine, Buddhist-inspired temple with truly amazing looking water that gives way to a hellish basement floor. A perfect and shocking contrast to everything above the surface. There's this one portion that takes clear inspiration from the short story The Spider's Thread. Like, how do you even think of that? What an amazing idea to include that in a Zelda dungeon. There's also a ton of fun things to do with the new item, the Whip. And swimming around and flipping over lily pads can be a blast as well. The whole place is dripping with atmosphere with this perfect juxtaposition between the two floors and alright, let's cut the shit. We all know what the best thing about this dungeon is. Koloktos. One of, if not the most satisfying bosses in Zelda history. Whipping his arms off is fun enough, but absolutely nothing compares to grabbing one of his big-ass swords and chopping off his damn legs. Just fucking wailing on the dude. Oh my god, this is the greatest thing in any game ever, maybe. I really did toy with ranking this dungeon at the very top of the list due to how exceptional the theme and the boss are, on top of having really fun and satisfying gameplay. But I do feel like the dungeon is just a tad easier than I would have liked. It's a mostly pretty straightforward affair that you don't really have to use your brain too much for, even though it is obscenely fun. As a result, it's absolutely one of my all-time favorites. There's just a few that are a little more satisfying to complete due to their complexity.
This is just a friendly game of tennis, nothing more.
The Forest Temple has long been the gold standard for Zelda dungeons. It's easily one of the most iconic and acclaimed dungeons in the series' history. And I agree. It doesn't really have a crazy theme or gimmick like a lot of the dungeons that came after it, but its main advantage is just being kind of flawless. Like, I legit can't really think of anything wrong with this place. It's an absolutely wonderful experience that makes you feel so many things, from bliss to intrigue to fear, all captured perfectly by that gentle yet slightly unnerving melody. Easily one of the greatest Zelda songs of all time. The Forest Temple music is just unmatched at setting such an immaculate atmosphere for this dungeon. It's also as large and imposing as you would hope a first adult dungeon would be, nicely contrasting how short and simple the 3 child dungeons were. This one is sprawling. It has a ton of alternate paths. It has those incredibly cool and memorable twisty corridors that you can straighten out with the bow. Don't even get me started on the other memorable portions like the lovely outdoor terraces, the absolutely fucking terrifying Wallmaster bits, and of course, hunting down the 4 Poe sisters. An incredibly unique and fun task that makes the dungeon further stand out from the crowd. Figuring out you need to shoot the paintings they're in with your bow is such a great aha moment. I like the little sliding block puzzle, and I especially gotta give credit to the way the last Poe just starts crying in the center of the dungeon since you killed all her sisters. That's wild. It really contributes to a lot of the somewhat sinister atmosphere at play here. And of course, the Phantom Ganon fight is pretty iconic, and hard to argue with as one of the game's absolute best. God, I love tennis. It's hard to really know what else to say. I mean, the Forest Temple is just so special. Even when I get lost searching for the third Poe sister, I can't say I find that to be a frustrating experience. This dungeon is just so ethereal and mystical thanks to the fun puzzles and tremendous atmosphere given off by its visuals and music that I honestly never want to leave. I've seen a lot of people claim this as their absolute favorite dungeon in the series, and I honestly have no rebuttal to that. Like, yeah, I get it. I really do.
Now that sounds like Robot Pirate Island.
Yeah, Nintendo really outdid themselves with the sand ship. I think I could sum up the exact reason for its placement on this list with a single sentence. They made a dungeon out of a time-traveling pirate ship where you fight a skeletal robot pirate. Holy shit, how do you even come up with this? This is one of the greatest themes to ever be attached to any dungeon in this series, with it also being complex and satisfying enough to navigate. Figuring out how to get to various rooms and whether you need the dungeon to be in the past or the future is super cool and immensely rewarding. Figuring out the way into the engine room was through the lifeboat ladder on the side made me feel like a genius. It actually wasn't that hard, but I don't know, let me have this. Fighting the robot pirate captain on the narrow mast is incredibly fun and intense. And like, dude, once again, it's a time travel pirate ship. Finding new little windows that allow you to shoot at that one time shift stone in the mast in order to solve puzzles is an absolute treat and a half. And I also love helping out my little skipper buddy and freeing his crew. It's genuinely so difficult to think of anything wrong with this place. And then there's the boss. So like I said, I can't think of anything wrong with this place. Yeah, that's right. You guys have all been dicks to Tantalus for years with all your little Mike Wazowski jokes. Do I think the design is stupid? Yeah, kinda. Do I think the boss is insanely fun and easily one of the best in the entire game from a gameplay perspective? Yeah, dude. It's so satisfying to charge up Skyward Strikes and chop these tentacles off. The weak point may be obvious, but shooting a giant squid monster in the fucking eye is fun. What is wrong with you people? This boss is so fun. I mean, yeah, he's no Kaloktos, but nothing is. I love making calamari out of this big, dopey idiot. It's a great boss battle that ends off in an amazing dungeon. Truly one for the ages. If you don't like the sand ship, I don't like you, period. We can't be friends. You guys made Tantalus cry for 14 years now. Give him a break. It's not his fault he's ugly. Alright, let me ask you guys a question. Which one of these dungeons has the word peak in its name? That's what I thought. The top 3 on this list are all absolute titans, and I realistically could have given this spot to any of them. But when it really came down to the wire, I gotta be honest, I think Snow Peak Ruins is the most perfect expression of what a Zelda dungeon can exist as, and how fun and engrossing of an experience it can be. This is undoubtedly one of the most unique settings for any dungeon in the series. A dilapidated snowy mansion whose original owners seem to be gone, with its current residents being an adorable Yeti couple. Out of every species in the Zelda series, the Yeti have the best track record by far. There's only 3 of them, and they're all top tier characters. This dungeon adapts the locked doors mechanic you take for granted in any other Zelda dungeon in a very natural way, since you're unlocking new doors to the house and following Yetta's directions on where to find the boss key. Except she leads you to cheese and a pumpkin instead. The look on Link's face when he finds these is just so priceless, man. This dungeon has such a perfect flow to it. You always know exactly where you need to be going next, but progression to get to that point isn't mindless and completely straightforward. You have to dig up keys in the snow, transport cannonballs between rooms, fire away at the ice blocking your path. There's just so much to this place, and all of it is fun and satisfying to discover. Even the slippery ice physics aren't that much of a nuisance here. They just add to the frigid atmosphere, which is perfectly contrasted by how warm and kind Yetta and Yeto are. I love how collecting the pumpkin and cheese allows Yeto to upgrade the soup he's making for his sick wife. which you can also scoop up for yourself. I also love how he just shoves you down to grab the ingredients. This place is so funny, oh my god. The fact that the ball and chain trooper is the mini boss, and after you defeat him, you just pick up his weapon and that's the dungeon item. That's perfect! I love that one room with all the pews that you can just smash to pieces with the ball and chain for absolutely no reason. It's just fun to destroy stuff with this thing, what can I say? To top this atmospheric, funny, sweet, incredibly enjoyable dungeon off, we have an awesome boss fight against the possessed Yetta, who jump scares you after the mirror turns her into Bizarro Yetta. It's pretty fun demolishing her icy form with the ball and chain, and it honestly makes decent use of ice physics. Like, you want to slide a bit in order to get out of her way before she crushes you. The aftermath where Yetto hugs his wife and all the hearts pop out, including the heart container. Oh man, don't even get me started. That just warms my heart. Snow Peak Ruins is a flawless dungeon in my opinion. With the perfect amount of complexity, incredibly fun and varied gameplay, an unforgettable atmosphere, and two incredibly sweet and adorable characters, making this place one of the absolute highlights of the entire series. I adore it with all my heart, and it is my pick for the best 3D Zelda dungeon ever. So that was my 3D Zelda dungeon ranking. I started replaying all the games for this in January. I wrote and recorded the entire script outside of this intro in May. And then me and my editors forgot to get this video finished until now because of everything else I wanted to get out. Oops. Yeah, I figured I'd better wrap this up before the end of the year, since this has been in production longer than the Adam Sandler ranking. So if you're upset that I put this out first, it's just a case of Adam Sandler needing to wait his turn, damn it. Sorry this took so long. At least I didn't announce it beforehand, forcing you guys to wait a needlessly long time for it. That certainly isn't the case for every video of mine that gets stuck in development hell. My bad. Anyway, let me know if you want more Zelda stuff. I like Zelda a lot. It's my third favorite gaming franchise, formerly first, and Majora's Mask is still my favorite game ever, so let me know if you want me to, like, rank the masks or something. Good night, Hyrule.